What's up, everybody? Dustin Mason here with Igniting Your Career in Car Sales. I'm sitting with Alex Gratto right now. What's going on, Alex?
Not too much, Dustin. I think this is going to be a great idea. I think we're really hoping to ignite, no pun intended, people's career in the car sales, and I think we can really give them a good jump start. There's not much out there. There's lots of books, but a lot of information to cram at once.
The real reason we're trying to do this podcast today is we were looking for a Canadian podcast that really dug into car sales, what it's all about, what the ups and downs are about it, and all that type of thing. So I'll go ahead and start introducing myself. My name is Dustin. I work for Lexus at the moment. I've been in car sales for about 3.5 years. Previous to that, I was in some other industries in the car industry. So I was a mechanic for a little bit. I also worked in the manufacturing business, and car sales is definitely where I'm going to end up for the rest of my life, and I have lots of good and bads about it. So what about you, Alex?
So yeah, Dustin, unlike you come from a familiar field at least. I come from something completely different. I come from a stationary engineering background a little bit in Alberta for a few years. So I came on car sales on a whim when a friend suggested to me as a joke, and I actually ended up trying it. And much like you, I'll do this for the rest of my life. Currently, I work for Performance Toyota, or just Toyota, I guess we can say in this case. But it's a lot of fun. I'm about 1.5 years now into car sales, and I had about 6 months at Mazda, which was really eye-opening. So it was good to get a little flavor bowl.
And it's such a funny business. I'll never forget the day that I told my parents I was quitting a factory manufacturing job to sell cars. They looked at me like I was absolutely crazy and that I was never going to do anything with my life. I remember them saying, you realize it's commission. You can't make any money in commission. And their perspective was so far off what it actually is once you do give it a shot. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think coming from a background like both you and I, where we worked with our hands and now we wear suits and get to look nice, which is kind of cool. It's a little different.
That is a perk.
A steady paycheck is easy to get used to, but it's not hard to look at car sales as a steady paycheck once you really start getting good at the craft. It's like any apprenticeship. Once you start getting better and you put the time in, it only gets better with age.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off with our episode 1, and that's literally just starting out. So for those of you already in car sales looking for some tips, this is going to be before you got into car sales, what to look for, that type of thing. So first thing that you want to do is decide what type of brand or clients you want to sell to. Now, what we mean by this is if you're a truck guy and you love trucks and off-roading and that sort of thing, you're going to want to sell to those types of people. You want to sell the off-road trucks, the off-road type people. So you might want to look for something more of a domestic brand.
Agreed. I think if you're prone to an environment like you mentioned about trucks, in terms of maybe out west or like you were in Alaska, things like that, it's more prone to have a truck. So getting on board with a domestic brand, the Chevys, the Fords, the Chryslers, those are the companies that you can make a lot of money with if you want to tailor your clientele around that. Doesn't mean you have to, but it is going to give you an edge.
Yeah, and I agree. If we right now we live in a very well populated, a little bit of mixture of suburbs as well as rural. If I lived out west right now, or maybe in a rural part of the country, I would definitely be focusing on those dealerships that sell trucks or more rugged type vehicles, maybe farm type stuff. But since we live in a city, I went for the more obvious choice, and that leads to my next point. When you're deciding what dealership to go to, first you want to figure out what type of dealership, but it's never a bad idea to shop a dealership. Now, yes, you're going to waste someone's time, but this is a very important thing to do, and it really helped me in my career. You want to test out how the business is done in your area, as well as maybe some things that you like or dislike about the experience. So when you go in there, you're going to want to pretend, maybe take a shop around online, see what you're interested in, pretend that you're going to buy a car, or maybe that you're interested in, or you're just starting out, and just maybe ask all the right questions. Start to think about what the salesperson that you're dealing with is doing, what you like, what you dislike about the experience. Ask some questions like, why should I buy from you? Or what makes your dealership better than the one in the next town over? The thing about Toyota in particular is there's dealerships in every town. There's one 10 minutes from the Toyota dealership Alex works from, and there's one 10 minutes from that. So you want to start to ask these questions, because these are questions you're going to be asked once you start to get into the business. I remember when I first shopped a dealership, I learned so much in that small town. There was this guy he was definitely very old school. He was doing it for a long time, and I was driving a BMW at the time, and I was going in there pretending I was trading in for a Chevy Cruze. And I'll never forget when I went to get the trade appraisal, I could hear the manager in the back room say, "Why would he be trading in a BMW for a Cruze?" And I could actually hear him say that, which put like this huge bad taste in my mouth. Yeah, I was a fake shopper, but what if I was a real buyer and I just wanted a Chevy Cruze? He didn't know that. Maybe I was downsizing. And that was one of the things I disliked. Another thing I disliked was I'm a pretty high energy guy. And at the next dealership I went to, the guy was so hyper and energetic, I thought his heart was going to stop because I wanted to drive a Hyundai Accent. There was no rhyme or reason to it. And these are things that I always think about when I have people come in that I want to be conscious of. What about you, Alex?
I think you hit the nail on the head, and for those of you who've never seen Dustin, he's a 6'1", blonde hair, blue eyes guy pulling up in a BMW. So maybe the manager did have a little bit of a reason to specify as to why he was a little weirded out. But I don't think that Dustin's right. One, you can't judge a book by its cover. Is basically what he's saying. Hit the nail on the head on that. And the other salesman, like you said, his heart pounding out of his chest. You want a happy medium. But I got to mystery shop a dealership as well, and it was kind of similar. It's okay to be new and look at the brochure and do your reading and do your homework. Typically, most dealerships won't put you on the floor until they think your product ready, which I personally think is the way to go, but different strokes for different folks. But the gentleman I had was the same thing. You know, I wasn't going to take too much of his time. He looked at the brochure for everything. Simple as heated seats, which almost every car has now. Bluetooth and heated seats have become so common. When someone says power windows now, you chuckle.
Yeah.
And now it's going to get to the point where we chuckle at Bluetooth because it's that common. Knowing your product, and I thought to myself, wow, you know, and this was, and I was a little bit in car sales already, but I'm thinking to myself, wow, you know, if I can learn the product even just a little bit better, it will give me a little more credibility. And like you said, why do business with Dustin Mason? Why do business with Alex Gratto? Why do you, the person that's listening to this podcast, why do business with you?
Yeah, think about that.
What makes you different?
Exactly. You need to tell a story. We have this one guy that we've worked with for a long time now. And I love his story because he tells it perfectly every single person he meets. He moved here from the Bahamas. He was a scuba diver for crabs. And the whole fact that he even tells his story makes people like him because they're not just buying a car from a blank face across the desk from him. They're buying a car from that story. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. I think the first thing, and I think Alex can agree with me, that we need to talk about is expectations.
100%.
The number one thing that everybody in car sales gives up on is their expectations. When you're being interviewed, and I think Alex will agree with this, when you're being interviewed for a dealership, they're always going to tell you that you're going to sell 12 to 15 cars a month. You're going to get a demo. You know, they're going to use an example.
$100,000 guy.
They're going to talk about the Jeff that sits over there that makes $100,000 a year and still takes all his vacation. They're going to tell you all the goods, but they're not going to tell you the bads. And unfortunately, it's the bads that make people quit because they think that they're not doing as well as they are. And I always have this story of this guy. I won't say his name. But he was very good at what he did, but he didn't realize that other people go through the same struggles as him. They still have those months of 4 cars. Now, keep in mind, if you're new to the car sales industry, you won't really know this, but the average person sells about 8 cars a month.
That's right.
On average. That means at the end of the year, if they divide up all the cars they sold for the year, it's going to average 8 a month. And that's like a good car salesman. That's someone making a living. There's going to be those months where they sell 15, but there's going to be those months where they sell 4. And it's those months that they sell 4 that they start to second guess themselves and think that they're not cut out for this or they're different than everybody else and everybody else is doing better than them. But everybody has them. I have them. Alex has them.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, no matter how new you are, and we all know that one person, and you'll meet this when you get into it, you'll know that one person has so much talent and can do so well, but they get so overwhelmed with the little things, like you said, you had a 15 car month, but be modest, because you don't know what the next month's going to hold. You don't know if you vacuumed your customers. Don't be harsh on the fact that you have to rely on ups, maybe traffic generate, we'll get into that later, but things like that. Just stay modest, keep your head true, you know, do what you can do to generate your own business, obviously. But yeah, it's hard. And we're not saying by any means, anyone listening, we're not saying it's easy to keep a positive attitude because we've all had bad days.
And a good team really helps with that.
100%.
How many times have we talked each other off the edge or talked another salesperson out of quitting just because they're having a bad month? It really comes, with us, we've been really fortunate, and it really comes down to that. But you also need to do that to yourself. You need to keep your expectations in check. The number one thing that we can give you in this whole podcast, if we do a 40 episode podcast, if we talk for years, doesn't matter. The number one most important thing is that you can't leave the dealership that you choose for 2 years due to lack of sales. Think about that for a second. No matter where you end up, I don't want you to leave that dealership until 2 years is up due to lack of sales. And the reason is the first 2 years it's not a write-off, but it's your learning curve.
It's your trial phase. It's a long trial phase, but it's 2 years.
The way the numbers works out, and this is someone, thank God, told me this before I got into the business. The way the numbers work out is at the 2-year mark, all those people you leased cars to, all those people you sold cars to, their neighbors, their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, a percentage of whatever you sell in those first 2 years, whether it be 20%, 15%, will come back and add to your current book of business.
Right.
So at the end of 2 years, if you haven't sold enough cars and made enough money, then yes, you're allowed to quit, or maybe try a different brand or something like that.
Try something different, like going back to the truck thing, right? Try something like that. Maybe you've chosen an area that you're not as strong in, but not because a matter of weakness, but a matter of passion. A matter of maybe not carrying a luxury brand as much as you do a normal brand, I guess, if you want to phrase it that way. But you're right, like putting your time, doing your due diligence. Dustin and I both left a dealership early in our careers.
For good reason. The reason I left mine was I didn't fit in with the clientele.
We should talk about that, actually.
Yeah,
why did you leave your first dealership?
So I was at a domestic brand, and you know what? I really had high hopes. They had a great training session. They gave you a demo. It was a great bunch of guys. They were all much older than I was, which was okay. I didn't really mind that. And the thing that I couldn't get around that I was different was it was a different type of selling. It was more blue collar. It was a little bit more aggressive, old school used car selling. And the guys that stay there do make a good living and they do great with it. The type of selling that I like to do is a little more white collar. I get along better with, teachers, lawyers, engineers, doctors, that class of people. And it's not like I'm making any more than the guy across the street that sells to, construction workers, factory workers, all that stuff. But they get along better. And I really did, early on realize that. And I quit right away. It was 3 months in. I did the training session. I did give it a good shot. And to be honest, the real reason is probably that I've always had a passion for Toyota Lexus due to my manufacturing background and stuff like that. But even if I just look at the clientele, it was more up to my speed, my type of people. If it wasn't because of that, I would have gave it 2 years. But the 3 months, I knew right away. I knew where I wanted to end up. I just wanted to have some training behind my back. And after Toyota, I stayed there for about 3 years before moving to Lexus. But there was no other reason. What about you, Alex? You were at Mazda for a little bit before Toyota as well.
Yeah, I was at Mazda, much like you. I did the 6 months fresh into the car industry. Great brand, had a lot of respect for it. The training, much like you, very old school training. This is how you close, this is the steps you take. It's
all about transparency. If you don't have transparency, it's 2017, people.
Write as many circles on the page and many arrows to confuse the customer as you can. Devalue your trade in front of them. A lot of the ethics that we don't go by now.
So it wasn't a brand thing with you. It was more the way that
the culture,
the way that they did business. So there are Mazda dealerships I'm sure that you would have fit in great with. Just that particular one.
Correct. Their training style was not maybe what I was looking for. Great people, great training, but just a different type in general. And opportunity came. I had my cousin working for Lexus, and she said, "You know what? I think you should really give Toyota a try." I did, and now I'm so grateful. I fell in love with the product. I think those of you out there, when you're going to sell something too, everyone has different views in terms of reliability versus what's worth it, what's not. You're going to be a Hyundai lover, Honda lover, Toyota lover, doesn't matter. I went with a brand I knew I could sell to families and friends that I knew would be reliable because I would be more comfortable selling it.
That's very important. Another thing is believing in the brand that you choose. If you're not a Chrysler guy, let's say, you don't believe in Chrysler, you've had a bad experience with Chrysler, you should not go sell for Chrysler, even though if they're hiring, maybe they're the only dealership hiring in your town, there definitely is no reason why you should go sell them. I think a big reason to my success is the passion that I had for Toyota Lexus. And that was because of my manufacturing background, my mechanic background. The thing that mattered most to me was longevity, resale value. things like that in a car were so important to me that it obviously portrayed onto the customer. You know, people always said I had maybe a little bit of an upper hand because I saw the other parts of the industry, like mechanic and in factory, so I could talk about it. But it wasn't that. It was more my energy that I had.
No, that's not a sell. Yeah, that's not a selling tool. That's you falling in love with the product.
Exactly, and it was really easy to pick up for it. I remember my first year in Toyota car sales. I was selling a lot of Corollas, and the Corolla S was just this car that I loved. I loved that you could get the nice sport interior for an extra $700 versus, you know, the equivalent LE, and my numbers showed that way. I was selling Corolla S's to every single person that ever wanted a Corolla. They'd come in looking at a Corolla LE or maybe a lower model, and I ended up selling them an S because I was so passionate that there was so much value in the brand. And you really have to convince yourself and get excited about that type of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, guys, going back to that, it's you gotta sell what you like. I can name off a handful of brands I don't like. I can name off a handful of brands I do. Dustin laughs at me all the time. I'm a big Jaguar fan. You know, I know the reliability hasn't been there for the last little bit. Go Jaguars! But it's a brand I love, and a brand I'm probably not going to sell in my lifetime because I'm very comfortable where I am. But maybe a brand I'll own one day, and that's another thing. Just because you like the brand doesn't necessarily mean you have to work for it. I guess you can love the brand and drive it, but it's passion, like you said. Any good salesman has had a customer come up to them and say, "We can tell you're passionate about what you do." Yeah. And as soon as you get that compliment, you know it's genuine.
And just because you're passionate about one brand doesn't mean you have to hate other brands.
No.
So
this isn't sports. You don't have to hate every other team aside from yours.
Exactly. A lot of times at Toyota, we go up against Honda. Is there anything wrong with Honda whatsoever?
No, they're a great brand.
Absolutely, yeah. I tell people all the time, you know what, that new Honda Civic, it's a great looking car. You definitely need to
I don't think you should go buy it, but I think it's a good
However, this is why you should buy from me, and I always used to try and close with that. But because the first time people come into a dealership, they're not buying a car. A lot of the times anyway. And they're gonna shop around, they're gonna go to Honda down the street. And I would say, you know what, that's a great choice. I don't blame you for going to Honda. Honda and Toyota are two very much the same. And you can talk about that.
Yeah, you don't want to bash somebody else's brand, and Dustin can attest to this too. Him being in the industry quite a bit longer than I am now, but it's don't bash somebody else's brand. I'll never forget. I had a customer even a couple weeks ago. You know, a very nice lady came in with her family. She went to Honda immediately, and apparently this Honda dealership, when I won't mention any names, went in there, bashed our car, bashed our dealership, and wouldn't show her a quote on paper or anything like that. She walked out. She didn't even test drive the car. She ended up coming back the next day with her husband signing the papers.
Wow.
At that point in time, maybe she would have liked Honda better, but now she'll never know just based on that.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, test drive what you feel comfortable with, because at the end of the day, it matters what you're safe in and what you're putting your family in. That's the most important thing.
Exactly.
But it's interesting. It's interesting. Bashing brands will not get you further.
Exactly, and that's right.
That's a big thing.
All right, so let's say you did get the interview at the dealership you want to work at. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how my interview went. So the first interview I had, there was 2 interviews. First interview I had was with the general manager and the general sales manager. So the person in charge of all the sales, all the finance departments, all that stuff. And a lot of the stuff they questioned me about was, you know, how I would like to drive business in my own way. And it was a pretty, you know, soft first time interview. It was just, you know, why I want to be in car sales, why I like cars, why I think I'm a good addition to the team, that sort of thing. But a week later, I got a call from the sales manager. So this is going to be my direct manager, my direct boss in the sales team. His name was Andrew. And when I sat with Andrew, you know, I was actually totally unprepared about what he was going to tell me. He, you know, sat there. He told me a little bit about the dealership and the company, because the company that we chose was, you know, a company that owned 30 other dealerships. It wasn't just like a small mom and pop shop dealership. So he told me that, you know, Toyota has the best resale value and a few things about Toyota. And then he also told me a few things about the company itself. So how we have the Platinum Award for this, how we have a customer service rating of this, the Google reviews of this.
So he sold the business to you.
He was selling the business to me. He was selling the business to me. And that's why I knew they were definitely interested in myself. And that's always a good pointer. If they're talking to you about why you should work there, that's great. And then after he finished all that stuff, he said to me, he said, okay, we're going to do just a really quick role play. And I was like, oh my God, I've never done a role play before. I've just heard all of these like horrible things at like Future Shop about role plays and all that stuff, right? So he says, okay, I like the Corolla, I like the price, but why should I buy from you? And I remember it took me a second to realize what he was fishing for. And I said, well, we have the award for the best customer satisfaction. We have the best Google reviews. We're part of this big company that really only focuses on customer service and employees. And because of that, we're a high volume dealership. We can, create a better price because of the high volume. And all the things that he just told me was what he was fishing for. And it really took me a second to think of that, because I wonder how many people aren't really listening to what he's saying in the interview because they're more worried about what they're going to say.
That's what he's actually looking for in you. I think that's what he was looking for was, is this guy actively listening? Because to get in this job, you have to actively listen.
And you have to sell yourself. You have to sell yourself. You have to sell the car, and you have to sell the company, because, like I said before, 10 minutes away, there's another dealership that can sell the same product. So you have to know those quick facts about that. And you know what? Maybe it was the same with you.
Yeah,
Alex,
it wasn't much different. And Dustin and I were fortunate enough to get interviewed by the exact same guy. Going into the interview, it was a little different. I think I had 6 months of experience at that time, and they were interested in me, which was kind of cool. But you still have to prove yourself in that interview. You can have 5 years worth of sales, but they really need to see why you're going to drive their agenda and why you're going to be the next big thing. And that's what every salesman should want. And he made me pitch a lease to him. And I remember he was a Corolla lease, and he made me pitch it. Wow. And he said, why the lease, and why should I lease, and what's the value behind it? So I gave him my pitch on a lease, which I'm pretty passionate about. This year, I think I'm hitting about 40% lease ratio on my first year at Toyota. And I'm pretty proud of that. And that comes though from truly believing what you sell. Going back to earlier, right? Pride in what you do and believe what you sell. And I pitched to him. I think he had mentioned it was on a Corolla or something like that. And I went over and said, hey, listen, you know what? You're paying for the portion that you're using. And are you someone that likes to get into cars frequently or get a new phone that often? And we all do. And he said, yes. So I said, okay, well, is it safe to say that in 3 years, the average person gets rid of their vehicle within 3 to 4 years? Do you see yourself doing that? Well, yeah, I do. Oh, perfect. All right. Maybe leasing's for you. Maybe it isn't. He sold it. It was perfect. Pretty much offered me a job on the spot, which was fantastic. But yeah, it's good and it's a lot of fun. But you have to, when you're in an interview, guys, and you're sitting across from that person, you make sure you can see yourself either being that person or working for that person.
Huge.
If you're
point.
sitting across and
So
this guy's
important.
tapping his legs and be like, you know what? I just rubbed off the last customer for about $8,000. You know that in your heart, maybe that is or isn't you. Maybe it is you. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but maybe it's not you. But this is the guy that's going to be mentoring you. This is the guy that you're going to be with day in and day out more than your family. Is this the guy you want to learn from? When you go in an interview, here's a tip. You tell them you want to be the man, but in a respectful way. You want to be the go-to guy in the dealership.
You want to be the car guy.
You want to be the car guy. Dustin wants to be the Lexus guy of the Niagara region. He wants to be the head man, regardless of the age. That's the guy you go to.
And you know what? Like, it's not just an interview of you. You're also interviewing them. This is your chance to see how they do business, what they're like, how he's going to coach you. Because that manager, whether it be, I should say he, could also be a she. How she's going to coach you over the next 3 years. How she's going to make you better. And you can ask those types of questions. Listen, how long have you been in the business? How can you make me become that elite salesperson that I want to be? How are you going to make me better? These are all questions that if you're challenging that interviewer, whoever it is, they're going to start to realize, you know what, this person's important. Yeah. They're not just looking for a job. They're looking for a career. And they're ready to be successful. And, I want to make them successful. That's what that manager is going to say.
It's true. Like Dustin said, you're almost interviewing them. It's so interesting how an interview plays out in car sales. They will honestly ask you sometimes, what do you want to know about me? What do you want to know about the company? Which is what Andrew said.
Yeah, exactly.
He flat out told me, what are you afraid of in this company? And I told him, like you said at the beginning, I said, you're the big fish in a small pond. This is what scares me. These are the stories I've heard. And he put those to sleep very quickly.
You don't want to be the big fish. You don't want to be the big fish in the small pond. You want to be the small fish in a big pond because that's where the money is. If you're already capping out, it's time to grow. It's time to get bigger. You can't grow. Yeah. And I think that's a good place to end this first podcast that we're going to do. If you definitely hit subscribe, hit follow, everything like that. Like, share, everything. The next few episodes, we're going to get into how the sales floor works. what to expect on the sales floor. You already get the job, so
What's your first
what
day like?
next?
What's an up rotation? What is an up?
What are some of the terms? What are some of the terms we use? We use so many analogies and all this,
Don't
you know,
use the
chit
box.
chat, small things like
Don't
that.
use the
Some-
box.
So yeah, we'll talk about the box a little bit too. That's like a 4-letter
There
word
is
and a
big
3-letter
no-no.
word. So we're going to talk about a little bit more things, guys. We're going to get into super big detail. This is just the beginning. Hope you tuned in. Hope you enjoy it. We will talk to you soon. Thanks for listening. It's Dustin,
Alex,
Mason,
Gratto, we
and
appreciate it, guys.
talk to you soon. Bye.